please like outlasting everyone who's been.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. Welcome to the July 29, 2021 meeting for the Shawnee County Board of County Commissioners. My name is Kevin Cook. I serve as the chair this year, representing District 2. Joining me today is Commissioner Bill Rippon, representing District 1. Good morning.
Morning.
And Commissioner Aaron Mays, representing District 3. Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Clerk, our first item.
Our first item is item 3, consent agenda.
There are two items. I would move for approval of those two items.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor say aye. All opposed. Passes 3-0. Our next item.
Item 4, new business, A, County Clerk number 1, consider all voucher payments.
Commissioners, this morning we have vouchers totaling $933,976.91. A couple highlights under there. Under building and maintenance to Knox Signs and Graphics for $10,371. This is for the first half of the electronic message board at Hillcrest Community Center. And then under special assessment to Sunflower Paving for $105,463.17 is for Green Hill Point subdivision street improvements, northwest 49th Terrace. I don't have any questions about any of this. I would move for approval.
Motion for approval by Commissioner Mays.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor say aye. All opposed. Reflected it passes 3-0. Our next item.
Item A2, consider correction orders.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion for approval by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor say aye. All opposed. Reflected it passes 3-0. Our next item.
Item B, Parks and Recreation number 1, consider approval of request to award bid and execute contract C266-2021 with Bartlett and West, Inc. for professional services on the Deer Creek Trail Robinson Extension Project for a lump sum fee of $55,000, utilizing the Parks and Recreation Building Maintenance Fund.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Boyd, Parks and Recreation. We are seeking your approval of this contract with Bartlett and West to begin the process to do the connection for the Deer Creek Trail Robinson Extension. This is just the first step in the project to get the design and the specifications written so that KDOT can take it over at that point in time. Do you happen to answer questions?
If you do have this approval and at that time, what's our timeline for this extension?
I've got a tentative schedule at this point in time, but we really don't know until we get our numbers going.
Okay.
I'm going from memory, but I believe that we would be starting sometime next year.
All right. Commissioner Rippon?
John, the grant for this project, that was with the Highway Administration, that was like the old ICE-T grants, was that?
TA grant? I
TA
believe.
grant?
Yes.
Okay. And how significant is it that we connect?
Oh, it's
Deer-
absolutely vital to finalize the Deer Creek connection.
Yeah.
We will be within 2/3 of a mile of having connection from the west side of town to the east side of town at the lake. Yeah, it's vital for that.
It's a huge segment there, so great link. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, so. All right, well, thank you.
Commissioner Rippon, I'm sure you've got your bike ready to go.
I was actually going to ask, do we need to do engineering, or has Commissioner Rippon already done it all?
Not done, I'm not.
Not on this section, I don't believe so, but
And normally with a grant like this, they bid out the project
Correct.
as well when it's time
Correct.
for construction.
we
Okay.
do all the front-end work, give that to KDOT, and then they take over from there.
Okay, I'll move for approval.
Motion for approval by Commissioner
Second.
Rippon, second by Commissioner Mays. All in favor say aye. All opposed. Reflect that it passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item.
Item B2, consider authorization and execution of the following agreements for a benefit fundraiser on August 21st at Crestview Shelter House. A, contract C267-2021 with Amy Schmidtline for the rental of Crestview Shelter for the purpose of hosting a benefit fundraiser event including alcohol sales with $100 to be deposited to the general fund. And B, resolution number 2021-54, temporarily exempting certain county property from restrictions on selling, serving, possessing, or consuming alcoholic liquor and/or cereal malt beverage from 10 a.m. to 10:30 p.m.
Good morning, Commissioners. Randy Luby, Parks and Recreation. Before you today is a contract and the resolution to serve and sell alcohol. This is a fundraising event. This group has already filled out the necessary paperwork for both the contract and the temporary permit license to sell the alcohol. This event is, they're planning on doing a home run derby, cornhole tournament, silent auction, raffles, just to raise money for this fundraiser. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Randy?
I have none.
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Mays, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item.
Item C, Department of Corrections, number 1, consider approval of request to post and fill a vacant custodian position at an annual salary including benefits of $39,994.70 with funding from the department budget.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tim Phelps, Department of Corrections. This item before you is just to refill a position that was recently vacated through a resignation. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Mr. Phelps? I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Mays. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. Thank you.
Commissioners.
Our next item.
Item D, Appraiser's Office, number 1, consider approval of request to add 5 additional data plans and Jetpack MiFis to the existing Verizon contract for a connected field environment at a cost of, total cost of $200 per month utilizing the Land Records Fund.
Good morning, Steve Bauman, County Appraiser. These Wi-Fi hotspots are going to create some efficiencies within our field data collection processes. It'll save our GIS team time in uploading the information at the end of the day, so they're going to be live. We've ran this through Becky Neosi and her Land Records Committee, and they recommended approval that the funding come from that source. So I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Bauman? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Mays. All second. Second by Commissioner Cook. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. Thank you. Our next item.
Item E, Election Office, number 1, consider approval of request to send an employee who is graduating with Certified Elections Registration Administrator certification to attend the Election Center National Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, at an estimated cost of $2,200 utilizing the 2021 Election Office budget.
Good morning, Commissioners. Andrew Howell, Shawnee County Election Commissioner. I just wanted to actually recognize Mickey this morning. Mickey, if you could stand for us, appreciate that. Mickey is the one that I would like to send. And she actually is in charge of all of the equipment, how it's set up, all of the ballot production. So it's a pretty intense position at times. So I would like to send her to that. She's the first Shawnee County employee to actually graduate from this program. Commissioners allowed us to begin sending people to that program back in 2015. So thank you for allowing us to do that. I think it's important that we do it to make sure that we're keeping up with the trends. And that we understand best practices, and Mickey does a great job of doing that for Shawnee County, so I would like to send her to that. And again, thank you to the commissioners for allowing us to have that kind of training. I think it's important, especially in the current environment with elections, to make sure that at the office we're using best practices and we're paying attention to the national scene as well. So if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I will say she's also covering her own travel costs, or a majority of it, so we appreciate her personal willingness to engage in paying for some of that as well.
Congratulations, Mickey, and thank you for everything you're doing. Although if you're here, who's running the elections right now? Okay. All right. Any questions for Andrew? Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Mays, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. Andrew, before you leave, You've got 10 seconds, 15 seconds. How are elections going?
Good. I would like to just remind the public, there's plenty of opportunity. There is no waiting at the office. The lines aren't long. Parking is great. There's plenty of parking and opportunity to come vote at the office early. It's going well. I would like to see a little more turnout, but we are having people come to the office every day. A little slow.
Okay. All right.
It's pretty warm out there.
Well, there's your pitch. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
Our next item.
Item F, Commission, number 1, consider approval of resolution number 2021-55 to continue COVID-19 incident command changes.
Commissioners, this was an item that was added yesterday. Our incident command structure was to expire at the end of July, and after consultation with the health officer and emergency management and Jim Crowell, there was a recommendation made to extend this until October. This does not put any new restrictions in place. This does not change anything that we are currently doing, but it does extend the incident command structure that we already have in place until October, should we see anything continue to dramatically change for the COVID response. So are there questions? Or I know Dr. Locke is present, Dusty Nichols is present, Jim's obviously here as well.
I have no question.
I'll make a motion then to extend the, approve the resolution, which extends the COVID response incident command until October.
I'll second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Mays. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Reflected, it passes 3-0. Our next item.
Item F2, continue discussion of proposed 2022 budget.
Good morning, Betty Greiner, Director of Administrative Services. Let me get this going here.
Betty, while you're getting that up and running, I was looking over our top 4 budget allocations, those being the Department of Corrections, the Sheriff, Parks and Recreation, and then Public Works. They make up 63% of our total budget. And I just think it's important to note that there's a lot of work done by those 4 departments, and we have very good leadership in all 4 of those areas. And we have leadership in all of our areas, but it's always important to note that that's where a bulk of our budget goes, is those top 4, but it's everybody else that's helping the county function as well. So I think I stalled enough for you to get your graphs
You
up.
did, that's right, they're all up there. And before we get started, I would like to point out that Parks and Rec did find an error in their budget submission, and so we have made changes to that. It decreased their overall budget request, but it also increased the 2022 flat budget. So those changes have been made on this spreadsheet, and so they are reflected in that.
Commissioners, we made allocations initially for all departments and areas except for 7 on Monday. And if it would please the commissioners, I would like to go back to those 7 that we skipped to see if we can't at least put some initial allocations for those 7 areas. And the first would be the community corrections. We had delayed making any commitment to community corrections. I see Mr. Phelps at the back of the room. Given that we were needing some additional information on the 2nd Judicial District and what contributions they may be making or not making.
Thank you, Commissioners. Tim Phelps, Department of Corrections. I know that particularly with this engagement with 2nd Judicial District, this requested allocation from the Community Corrections for fiscal '22 has become a little bit of a plate of spaghetti. And so what I have done to try to help crystallize the components to it is I've prepared a little memo, and I'm not suggesting that we go through it line item by line item, but I thought it would help the commissioners to kind of see it in scope.
Sure.
So I have a copy. Page, I have kind of boiled it all down and crystallized to what I think would be an effective, that would allow us both to break from Second Judicial District and address some other interests that we had been trying to meet by our requested allocation. And we could do both of those for a total of $315,173.26 increase to our budget for fiscal '22. And of course, I'm happy to discuss it more in depth as you would like me to.
Tim, the flat budget amount, and I'm just checking with Betty just to make sure we're all in the same column, was $337,840.
Yes, that's correct.
And so the request then from Community Corrections would be to increase from the $337,840 by $173,026.
That would bring it up to
$653,013.
$653,013.
Okay. And then, is that then the request then of Community Corrections, is that at least have that much allocated?
Yes, sir, and that would allow us to then proceed with detaching from the Second Judicial District, and those staff members and other services would come into the Third Judicial District.
Questions for Mr. Phelps? I'll make a motion then that for the 2022 budget, and again, these are all preliminary until approved by the, on August the 26th, that the budget for Community Corrections be $653,013. Is there a second?
I'm thinking.
All right.
Give me that number again, 600 what?
653,013.
Commissioner Rippon, I also added it on here, so it's on the
Oh, on this. I think I have a copy of that, too.
Tim, could you go back and just sort of explain to me the need for the additional 3 positions and you know, how that affects corrections overall?
Yes, sir, thank you. When I assumed responsibility for the agency, I started making an assessment as to the level of proper services being provided, both as to how many cases each officer was responsible for, and what kinds of things we were doing as it compared to the regulations that require certain things from the agency under state law. And I determined that they were looking at upwards to 90 per officer caseload, and that is significantly out of sync with both what would be a reasonable caseload and also what was the state average, which was around 34 to 40, depending upon the level of population in the different districts. And so I wanted to begin addressing that problem so that if they have fewer cases, then they can deal with the cases at the intensity level that intensive supervised probation is supposed to do under statute. And last year, fiscal '21, the commission gave me some funds so that I could get some additional staff to address that, and I got it down to around 70, and I'm trying to continue work on that, both to reduce caseload and to get more services brought into the facility so that we can have an impact on recidivism with our clients, rather than just keep sending them to prison, try to get them to change their patterns of living. So that's it in a nutshell.
Has the whole COVID thing impacted the caseload?
Well, Commissioner, first, we didn't ever shut down.
Okay.
So we've been working through the whole process. We went to do more on phone and video with our clients. To more directly answer your question, it has stalled it for a bit, and so our caseload's dropped a little bit, but that's a false reality, because once everything opens back up, they're going to surge back up to, I think we're closing in on 700 as our agency-wide load, active cases, and then we'll probably go back up to 850 to 900 once the COVID-19 is over, so to speak.
So in essence, when the district attorney discusses having a backlog of cases, eventually that all will filter down, or at least some of that will filter down to you.
Yes, sir. And not that it's directly on point, but it is a coming reality. The legislature passed a law in this year that allows community corrections to supervise people who are on diversion, felony diversion for certain services. So that can turn into an additional caseload if that all plays out as the statute might allow it. So that's not presently on our plate, but just to kind of see, the legislature's trying to put more into community corrections because it's cheaper per client than prison. And so they're trying to shift the focus.
I think it's also important to note that the majority of the budget for community corrections comes through a state grant that's monitored by Shawnee County or administrated by Shawnee County. However, the amounts that we're talking about today are the county match to the state grant.
That is correct, sir. That is correct.
So Tim, the rental costs on here for additional office space, and then you've got training activities, space for training activities as well, $71,000. Is that in your current location? Are you just knocking out a wall, or, I mean, what kind of?
Yeah, that's fair question. Right now, with our staff, we have filled up every square foot of the current office space. So what I was talking about doing is leasing some additional space in the building and moving more of our programming activity up there. It's a series of basically large rooms that we can set up to bring in and have classes and various programs in AA, that kind of thing, on site. We do better if the services are on site because we know that the client's there and behaving because we're right there with them. So that's why I'm trying to bring more of these services into our operation so that we know that they're being done properly and they're having a good effect.
And you guys just signed your lease, right?
I think we're in the second year from the last signing, yes, sir, for the property or for the space that we're in.
Okay.
Other questions? Right now, there is a motion on the floor. There's not been a second.
Looks like Betty has something to say.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything.
Oh.
I was just waiting to add or delete that, is all.
I'll second that. You say we still have a long ways to go.
The motion has been seconded. Is there any further discussion or possible amendments?
Well, I would amend it a little bit. I think everything he says is totally justifiable, but I do feel like we've got to find ways to save some money. And, you know, maybe instead of adding 3 positions, we add 2, or, you know, maybe we cut the size of the additional office space a little bit, 1 less vehicle, that type of thing. And so I'm thinking maybe if we just maybe take it down to like 630 or something like that, it saves us an extra 23,000, and then, you know, he can still make improvements to the program.
I would accept your motion to amend to 6:30. Commissioner Rippon, will you accept the amendment?
I will.
Okay. There's been a motion made to establish a budget for community corrections for $630,000 by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, reflect that it passes 3-0. If we can skip the district court for just a moment and go to the sheriff. I know that the sheriff has a representative here who has a meeting that's upcoming and may need to leave. So if we could discuss the sheriff's budget. Under sheriff? the budget request for the sheriff was $20,596,402 for a flat budget, with a budget request of $21,391,133.
Good morning, Commissioners. Shane Hubler, Under Sheriff, Shawnee County. The lion's share of our increase is fuel costs and our projected fuel cost increase. We drive approximately 1.8, almost 2 million miles a year. As fuel costs continue to rise and the uncertainty of where they're going to end up, we looked into the projections through the federal government, and that's where we came up with our projection on cost. We have been able to save money over the years on our fuel costs because of our very good working relationship we have with Capital City Oil that the county has. So that's the lion's share of the costs of where that is, to the tune of, it was an increase of almost $250,000.
210.
Yes.
So, but there is an overall increase of,
794,000 over the flat budget. I showed that they're asking for an additional 210,000 for gas.
okay. And then the additional other 500,000?
A lot of that is in contractual increases, whether that be with Tyler New World, Axon, software services, maintenance agreements. They continue to increase 3 to 5% every year.
And you're not requesting equipment purchases out of that 500,000, for such as vehicles? Because I thought we did have requests for some equipment.
Ammunition.
Yeah, I was going to say, the vehicles we discussed
No, but the
were
ammunition,
capital
the ammunition
outlays.
costs.
Ammunition costs were significantly more. I don't believe there were any vehicles that were on this budget. They
Okay.
were all in capital outlay. There might have been some equipment or something, but not vehicles.
Correct. There's some minor equipment, garage equipment, equipment for the SWAT team, for just regular business, but no individual large purchases through this request. That was all on CIP.
Commissioner Mays?
There's an office chair replacement for almost 13,000.
Sure.
And then there's also prisoner medical expenses, which is an increase of, $8,800. Is that a new, I mean, it looks like it's an unbudgeted expense from last year, so is that something new?
The prisoner costs, if, as the court decision a couple of years ago, whoever arrests the person is responsible for that. It was a case out of Sedgwick County where their jail wasn't, short version is the sheriff's office in Sedgwick County wasn't responsible if Wichita Police Department arrested them. And it's the same here. The sheriff's office is responsible if we arrest them, not the Department of Corrections. And we've just been trying to budget that money. You have absolutely no idea what those costs are going to be, and trying to get that cost to a realistic number where people have pre-existing conditions, but they can't go to jail with those pre-existing conditions, so they have to go to the hospital to get treated and et cetera.
We did, several years ago, we did set up a fund for that if they have budgeted money for that and they did not spend all of that budget line, then it's transferred to that, to a fund, but just for medical uses, for the sheriff's office medical uses. So there is a fund set aside that does have some money in that. We can check and how
Jennifer,
much
do you know?
is in that fund. I don't know off the top of my head. We can check and see how much is in that fund.
Okay.
She's checking now.
What's that?
The jail budget for. It's on
No, I don't have that with me.
some of the other big expenses here, is priority dispatch, we were aware that that was coming. And that's 40,000 approximately. And then there's a pretty significant battery replacement for radios. An increase over last year and the year before. Was that just due to when they were purchased, or?
The age of the radios, as everyone knows, battery life shortens, and we're getting to end of life on a lot of those batteries, and we have, unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of radios.
Yeah.
And yes, the priority dispatch maintenance is a new expense above last year.
Well, and then, 40,000 for the priority dispatch, but then another 36 for the training of the 911 operators to do the priority dispatch. I mean, so that's, I think, a justifiable expense as well, because I think in the long run, it's probably going to save us quite a bit, so.
That is absolutely our hope.
On the priority dispatch, Betty, we purchased the priority dispatch software through Spark. Would the training of the priority dispatch be able to be used through ARPA?
The training,
Right. Again, the Spark is what purchased the software.
but I think that is likely that it would be based on because it was, if it is, connected to COVID, which that was the purpose of purchasing it. I think the training could likely be covered by ARPA.
Okay.
To shift back, the job ledger for medical expenses for the sheriff's office is now at $278,200. That's the balance in it. And that can be used anytime they have spent more than their budget for that line item. So if they didn't budget anything for this year for that line item, they could use that fund for anything that came in.
Commissioner Mays, thoughts?
Well, so there was also $100,000 for the retirement fund. In looking at this, I would say that the sheriff's retirement fund's actually in a pretty good spot compared to a lot of them. So I don't know that we need to put $100,000 in there this year. And then the other thing I was going to ask is, there's an item on here, a new division for field force. Could you explain what that is?
Correct, with the I don't know the proper politically correct term, but the riots that have gone on in the last couple of years, Sheriff Hill determined that we needed to have an active field force unit and to get them properly equipped and that training, and that's what those costs are for.
Okay. And that was about 15,000, it looks like.
Could I go back to that retirement fund just a minute? Our balance is $1,441,900. And your eligibility, or your eligible people is 1.5 million. How many people do you actually anticipate? I know that's kind of a...
It's a great question. I wish I really knew the answer. We anticipated at the sheriff's office a lot of retirements actually in this calendar year. Those haven't come to fruition. We've had a couple, but nothing major. At some point in time, we're going to get a lot. And I guess kind of, sir, your guess is as good as mine. We could have up to 20 people retire literally today. And that is why we continue to add to it, because at some point in time, because we have several people that are not only eligible by county standards, but especially where we really try and focus in is when people hit their 75 points with KPNF, and when they hit that, it's just a matter of them trying to get their last 3 quarters or last 3 years, and the pay that goes along with that, and we should have theoretically hit that this year. So I anticipate in the next year or two, and I would have said this last year too, so I apologize for that, but I really do believe that we're looking at probably 20 officers in the next year or two. Whether that's going to be in calendar year 2022 or 2023 or split, I really don't know. We have 2 or 3 officers that have said they're going to go at the first of the year, but nobody's very committal, and unfortunately, they really don't have to give us a whole lot of notice.
But at the same time, if those officers leave and you fill those positions with new officers, they're going to be at a lower rate of pay than what your current officers are.
Correct.
But you'll have training expenses for those new officers.
Correct.
So it all washes out in the end.
Say you might have as many as 2022, but how many are eligible or will be eligible in 2022? Do we know?
That would be, since you have your open, there'd be there's a form there that shows the list of those eligible for retirement.
Does it say is 20, is that half of those that are eligible, or is that more than half, or is it?
It's a full page.
Yeah, it's this many,
Okay.
and then 5 on the next page, so.
It's this many, Bill.
Without counting, yeah, it's like about that big.
More than 20.
And you can tell by looking at these numbers, you know, some are gonna be a lot more expensive than others. And so it's, I guess a lot of it depends on who retires. But, you know, and I'll just say this, not necessarily in regards to the sheriff's office, but I think it'd be good if we develop some sort of a formula that, you know, we have a goal for what we want each department to be. And I know right now, we're going for 100% funded of everything, but the likelihood of all eligible retirees leaving in the same year is very slim. And so,
Jennifer and I were just talking yesterday about maybe applying a percentage to that, so that we want to get a percentage, like, I don't know, 75% of the eligible or something like that we think may be a more realistic number at any given time. So
I think that's a good idea.
And I'll also mention too that, I think I mentioned this before, but I'll say again, we do also work with the departments at the end of the year if they have some excess budget, or, you know, have some budget left. I don't say excess, but if they have some budget left at the end of the year, that we work with them, that they can use that to transfer into the retirement fund also.
I like that.
Commissioner Mays, with the increase to the fuel, increase to ammunition, and contractual services, would the commission accept a proposed budget of $20,900,000, again, as an initial amount?
That would be an increase of $303,598. You said $20,900,000, right?
Correct.
I mean, that would definitely cover the fuel. And that'd be basically $500,000 less than requested.
Mm-hmm.
What if we just did 21 million even?
Okay. My motion dies. Commissioner Mays, you're making a motion for?
Yeah, I'll make a motion for
Okay.
that.
Motion made for a budget of $21 million for the sheriff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Passes 3-0. Thank you. All right. Go back up to the district court. We had delayed some of our discussion regarding the district court because of trying to get some more certainty on the use of our ARPA money and how it may be applied, as well as looking at the contractual services that the court has with court-appointed counsel. That's a significant increase for the courts, with an increase of $261,000, or strike that. Yes, $261,000 is the increase.
Yes, but what they're actually, the increase for the request is actually $256,461 over the flat budget. if you'd like me to report back what we found from
Yes, please.
our consultant for the American Rescue Plan. We talked about this in our Spark Committee meeting, and what it really came down to is any increase that is attributable to the judicial backlog would be covered as an eligible cost for ARPA funds. So if you wanted to give each of those attorneys or the pro tem judges an additional amount while they were working on the backlog, then that would be an eligible cost. At the time that it's determined that that backlog has been taken care of and is done, then at that point in time, those extra funds would have to cease. You know, we would have to stop paying the excess at that point in time. So it would be, in order for those excess, that excess amount to be covered by that, they would have a separate contract that would just be for this period in time when they have extra caseload due to COVID.
Commissioners, I might note that it has been 10 years, in essence, since there has been any change to the court-appointed counsel. My recommendation to the court is if we're going to be looking at doing changes, it would be better to have small incremental changes rather than trying to catch up in one bulk term.
That would be my preference as well.
But I also note that there's a deficiency, and so.
My apologies, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt
you're fine.
you there. You know, and just to kind of go off of what Betty was talking about, is that I had a chance to talk with the Wood O'Brien consultant yesterday also, and there is a concern that even if we were to fund some of this with ARPA funds, that at some point we're going to have a cliff when that runs out, and so we'll end up having to pay this money probably either way. I don't think it's necessarily a great fit for ARPA funds at this point. I think it's something that we probably need to go ahead and increase it. But again, like you said, a little more incremental would be my preference.
But I would want to do that moving forward. I think we need to catch them up and then moving forward. But, there's just such a deficiency right now. I don't know, LaDawn, if you have any other input.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lee Welch, Court Administrator, 3rd Judicial District. I really don't have any specific input other than the time period that we're talking about. It's been over 10 years since any of our contract attorneys have had any increase in pay. I did a completely non-scientific survey of the other urban courts in the state of Kansas as far as pro tem judges, and our pro tems are paid $100 per half day, which it's still amazing to me that we can find attorneys who are willing to put their time towards assisting the courts for that price. Most of the other urbans pay at least $350 a day, upwards of, I think there was a couple that are paying $400 a day. So the small increase in the pro tem attorney fees or pro tem judge fees that we requested from $100 to, I believe, $125 a day or per half day. So as far as the contract attorney fees, we just sort of ballparked those numbers. That was, again, completely unscientific. We worked through the numbers as far as what we were currently paying on those contracts as a whole and what we would be paying if with various increases. And these were the numbers that we thought were fair given the time period.
But we did find that we were behind what other counties pay as far as their rates.
Yes.
And the caseload of the court-appointed counsel.
Correct. And the caseload has increased with COVID. It's not, that wasn't the primary reason for the request. I think all of our contract attorneys are seeing more cases. That's just a caseload issue in general.
I know that it's a huge ask and it's a big bite, but I would ask that we try to get as close to what's requested, and then knowing that any increase from this point forward would be on a scheduled basis.
We are way behind.
Mhm.
When you say take a big bite at this point, how far are you?
I mean, I would like us to get to where, as close to the requested amount as possible. Again, knowing that it has been 10 years since they've seen an increase, we're behind where the, just equity in what the payments are, should be.
To point out, give you an idea of how far we are behind, for our non-contract attorney fees that we pay on a regular basis, those attorneys who have conflicted out, sexual violent predators, other cases that are not covered by our contracts, we currently pay $62 an hour. The present bids rate is $80 an hour. So we're behind. If you take a look at that amount that we're paying for our non-contract attorneys, we're behind substantially in that area as well. But that is not addressed in this budget ask.
With this request, your requested budget, how close would that bring you to being kind of an average for the salaries or contracted people?
It would get us close.
And these, again, are attorneys that are putting in over or close to 30 to 35 hours a week already, in addition to what they may be doing with other practice.
Correct. And the contracts as they read presently do not provide for a cap on cases. So if an attorney on, say, one of our care and treatment attorneys, they're contractually obligated to cover cases assigned to them, whether there are 6 cases or 26 cases. And that goes for, every category of those contract attorneys. One of the changes that you'll note in this year's budget was a request for an additional amount to provide to attorneys that are willing to take on appellate cases. In the past, contract attorneys, some contract attorneys would take on those appellate cases, and some chose not to because of the additional time involved, their own time. And so part of the separate number of $25,000 is to allow those attorneys who are willing to take on cases that are going to the Court of Appeals an additional amount.
So I'll make a motion, and I'm just going to take a bit of a haircut off of this and make it $2,625,000. So that would take approximately $50,000 off.
I'll second. Any other discussion? Motion made by Commissioner Mays, second by Commissioner Cook. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Passes 3-0. Thank you.
Commissioners.
Okay, that would be an increase of $207,052. You said $2,625,000, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
I think this would be a good time for me to make a comment, and I think we are going along with a couple comments. First of all, we had discussed with the district attorney's office a little bit the 3 positions that he was asking for, and we had also talked about ARPA funds for those positions. It was verified that, yes, those positions should be able to be covered by ARPA funds as long as it is just to cover the judicial backlog. of the cases, and then once that backlog is done, then those positions would be eliminated. So, and I think, if I remember right, the DA did mention that at the podium, that those positions would only be for that time for the backlog. So, just to get back with you and make sure you all know that what had been said before is correct on that one. And I also think, along with that, it is just a good reminder that these ARPA funds are one-time funds. And so I would be hesitant for you to depend on them for ongoing operating costs, because as Commissioner Mays mentioned, there will be a cliff if we do that. If we depend on this for operating costs that are not, if they're COVID-related that will go away, then that is what it's for. But if it's operating costs that we know will be continuing after that, at the time that those funds go away, then, they would have to be absorbed in our budget. So just a couple comments to think about on there.
And so, Betty, would it be in our best interest then to adjust the district attorney's budget by that $175,000?
No, I don't believe so, because
Okay.
this is one time. These are directly related to COVID for the backlog. And so I think they are a perfect example of what would be good for this. Now, that's something we'll have to go to the Spark Committee, and would come through their recommendation to you if they so choose. But as we also know that the decision is ultimately with you as to what you want to use the ARPA money for.
Did we vote on district attorneys?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Okay.
With leaving it
I
at the
remember
flat
the
budget.
discussion, but I can't remember how it ended. so-
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Did we leave that out, those 3 employees out when we?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Parks and Rec is our next area that we had left unaddressed on Monday.
So after the change that we made, they are asking for $391,092 over the flat budget. 48,000 of that is a retirement fund transfer. There's also 220,000 in contractual services, an increase of 220,000, and then a 75,000 increase in cartograph software, as well as 70,000 of additional workers' comp.
Tim, is there anything you want to add or additional?
Tim Laurent, Parks and Recreation Department. Well, no, I think Betty's done a really nice job of explaining what our increases are. I'd be happy to answer any questions about those particular areas. I think the cartograph numbers that she mentioned were basically balancing out what our portion of the cartograph fees are between Public Works, the Weed Department, and Parks and Recreation. I think we weren't paying our fair share, so this is just making it right. But I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those areas that she mentioned.
how much was the cartograph share?
I think it was
75,000.
75,000.
And that takes it from the Weed Department.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Was there a
Well,
corresponding?
the weed department still pays some of it.
But not as much.
Yeah.
But not as much. It's more allocated more by their use.
But was there a corresponding decrease in the weed department's budget to? I mean, I guess that, if we're paying for it from one pocket or the other, if we're gonna move the money from one, we actually
Yeah.
have to move the money.
I don't believe that it was budgeted in the weeds department's 2021 budget.
I see John Lannon at the back of the room through the,
Is that correct?
That is correct.
It was not budgeted in their 21 budget, and then they got hit with this bill. So since in my flat budget calculation, I used the 21 budget amount, which did not include that, so it would not be included in my flat budget.
So was it paid out of contingency then for 21?
I believe we paid it out of their equipment fund.
Okay.
But our total cardiograph ticket was how much? What are we paying on that?
I don't have that number, the total number. I do, Betty is probably right. You're probably correct, but my number was a little lower than that. I was
Oh.
at $46,384 was the difference.
Oh.
But I would go with Betty.
Oh.
I hope I'm right, but yeah.
Yeah, I would too.
You said you would too? Man,
How much are we using the cardiograph?
no, not a math guy.
I guess, Commissioner Rippon, I know that you've had concerns
I have.
for a number of years about cartograph, whether it's a good use of county funds, whether or not we should continue to use cartograph or not. Tim, do you want to talk
Sure.
about the use of cartograph, whether
Yeah.
it's a good use of county funds or whether we
Yeah.
should continue?
Oh, yeah, and I'll be real candid. I think it is a good use of county funds, but I think that, because it does work with see-click fix. So if someone logs a complaint on see-click fix, takes a picture of something wrong in a park, that goes directly into cartograph and notifies our staff, and then it creates a work order, and then we go deal with it. So from that standpoint, it's fantastic. And that process is working really well. I think where we need to either decide, we either need to do a better job of some of the other things that it does, or frankly not do it. So at the end of the day, we're asking staff to log what they've done that day, how much time did you spend at Ted Inslee Gardens today? How much time did you spend at Oakland Community Center, whatever it is? And then, in theory, then we would know what our total expenses are for all of those areas. And again, just being brutally honest, at this point, we have some staff that are really good at that, and then we have some staff that aren't. And a lot of it has to do with computer savvy and that sort of thing. But so we have staff that manually enter some of those things instead of the staff doing it live on their iPads. But I think it does generate valuable information. When we're trying to tell people, what are we doing? We can pull that up at a moment's notice and say, with pretty good accuracy, that we're spending X amount of time here and X amount of time there and what our costs are. But we need to do a better job of, across the board, using it. And I've been very candid with staff. If we can't get to that point, then we do need to look at reducing some of it.
So, if I may.
Yes.
Tim, that software, is our contract based on the number of users that we have or the number of features that the program has? Or?
A little bit of both, but
Okay.
but primarily they come up with a price per user. And of course, that price is dictated by what features you're using with the software. So, but the bills do come with how many licenses or how many users you have.
And you're monitoring how much people are using it?
We are. Yes, we are.
And if we see that a Parks and Rec employee is not using it to its full ability, do we take that and give it to someone else who will, or?
Well, we do. We talk to them about it, and that's, as I mentioned, we have some staff that have iPads that are really good at entering this information on the fly. We have others that come back to the office at the end of the day or the shop and fill out it on a piece of paper, and then we have staff fill that in. So we're kind of doing it both ways.
I do have a little additional information. Parks, Public Works, Solid Waste, and Parks and Rec are the three departments that are using it. Noxious Weeds is not using cartograph at all anymore.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, I didn't know
And-
that either.
Not related to you, but Kurt, if you could just nod your head, are you guys using it, you feel like, to your full ability? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
For what we need it for, I think we're getting value out of it.
Okay, thank you.
How many licenses do you have? in your-
And Kurt, if you come on up so we can catch.
Kurt Niehaus, Director of Public Works. I believe we have approximately 10 licenses. We use it to track our equipment costs, and we log in all of our signs in Shawnee County in cartograph, so we know where they're at, how much they cost, how much it costs to put them up. So we use them for a number of things that we think are important. Can I honestly say there's not a better product out there? No, but we're using cartograph and we find value with it.
You also track our expenses for townships?
Yes, absolutely.
That we are
Yep.
contracted to take care of.
No, I just want to tag on to what Kurt's saying. That's exactly what my understanding is. The reason we purchased Cartograph was to be more of an asset manager type program. So, like Kurt says, we can pull it up and I can tell you how many water fountains and drinking fountains I have across the park system and the last time they were serviced. And also our fleet department uses Cartograph pretty extensively. So they do a real nice job of logging all the maintenance that we do on all of our vehicles through Cartograph.
Part of that, I know Commissioner Rippon, you know firsthand, when the county and the city merged Parks and Recreation, there was a real communication divide about what assets we even have, or what the condition of those assets may be, or what needs serviced and when it was last serviced. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, we are now 10 years into a merger. And Tim, do you think that now you have a full accounting of everything? Or are you still finding things that you didn't know?
I think we're still finding things, but I think we have a really good accounting of what we have. I had a request, for example, from the advisory board recently about wanting to know the number of roofs that we had. Well, we don't break it down to just a roof, but I do have accounts of facilities and that have roofs, so we were able to do some, to get that information really quickly. I know there's been instances in the past where I've had commissioners call me and I've been able to do it at home. Just pull it up and get that information immediately. So, yeah, I think it does serve a purpose. I think it is beneficial.
How many users do you have?
We were just talking about it. I thought we had 40 licenses. Linda thinks we might be closer to 70. So.
And how many people are dedicated just to administrating all this information?
Well, we only have one person who spends the majority of their time on Cartograph. Of course, Josh Lehman has many other duties, but he's the administrator of the software, but he doesn't spend the bulk of his time on it. But the person that works for Josh, who does enter all those manual records, that's the majority of her job.
We spend a lot of time and effort and money tracking a lot of this information. Does it save us any money?
Well, in theory, it should. I mean, you should be able to have a schedule and know when you need to go and service these things. So you're able to set up your schedule for preventative maintenance on HVAC systems through Cartograph. And so when one of our staffs logs in the morning, he gets a notification that says you've got these on the horizon. So if for no other reason, we should be operating more efficiently. If we're staying on top of those things, then there's less chance of them breaking down and us having major repairs down the road. So I think you could make a case that it does save us money in the long run. No doubt we spend a fair amount of money to keep it going, but to pay for the system.
I think this is a software that we should continue to use, but perhaps, Commissioner Rippon, your comments are well received, that we need to look at how it's used and maybe refine the users and make sure that we're getting the most bang out of our buck.
I think maybe we could reduce the number of people who enter information on there. We're getting a lot of data, a lot, but what good is it doing us a lot of times? I think we're just collecting data to collect data sometimes. And I have some concerns that we're eating up a lot of people's time, like you say, during the day or at the end of the day, whenever they enter this. If you figure all that time, we're losing a lot of man hours just entering data.
But at the same time, one of the things that we saw was having Parks and Rec being more accountable and operating more in a business model. And it's been a long, hard struggle to be able to even say, how much does this program cost us? How much does this operation cost us? And I know that that's been a thing that we've struggled with for making sure that we are being responsible to the taxpayers of Shawnee County. But I understand where you're coming from, Commissioner Rippon.
I just don't know that it's saving us. I know it's costing us a lot. I don't know how much it saves us. And quite frankly, don't see many reports or anything from it, so I don't know.
Well, I don't have our park operations director, Jeremy Myers, here today, but I can tell you that he operates out of Cartograph virtually all day, every day. Because again, all of our maintenance requests, all of our work orders are through there. That's how he tracks the status of those projects with his staff. And he does require them to go in and mark those off, and he's pretty good about staying on them when they don't. So I think, but I do think your point about staff time is well received. I mean, I understand that concern, and I think that's one of the reasons why we have some of these folks filling out paper forms, because it was quicker for them to do it that way than it was for them to learn and be comfortable doing it on an iPad. If you have a tech-savvy person, they can do these things in minutes. Just literally, the best case scenario, and we have some staff that do this, will do it throughout the day, and it literally takes them 2 or 3 minutes to enter their time after every job. And so we've tried to be, I think, again, I'm not dismissing your comments, because I think you're right if you try to force some of these folks to do this, because it's just going to be hard for them to do it. And that's what we're trying to balance.
I do note that it's about a little after 10 o'clock. We're going to stand for just a couple minutes. We're going to continue our discussion, though. So, other questions about the Parks and Rec budget?
I don't think this is about Parks and Rec, but I think Kurt has some
Kurt?
comments he'd like to make.
Kurt Niehaus, Director of Public Works. On the issue of maintaining or working with Cartograph, regardless of the tool that you use to track your assets, it takes time. Even if you use something as simple as a spreadsheet, that takes a lot of time to maintain. So whether you use Cartograph or some other tool, it takes time to maintain all of that data. It's not, it doesn't come free. I just add that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is an overall request to increase the Parks and Rec budget by $391,092. Commissioner Mays?
So, a couple things. It looks like a good chunk of the increase is the work comp and then the health insurance. I guess I'm curious why that wasn't included in the flat budget. I mean, it seems like something
Health
that...
insurance is included in the flat
It is,
budget.
okay.
Yes. Any increases to health insurance, everything in MSA 1, which is personnel costs, is all included in the flat budget.
And then the work comp, though, because that is not, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, yes, it is included in.
Okay, okay.
Yes, I split that out, but that is because it's all in MSA 1. So yes, it is included.
Okay, and then there's a line in here, contractual services. It says consists of additional contracts, grounds, GOS, and rate increases for contracted trade vendors. An example given is Central Mechanical. Could you speak to that just a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, well, for Central Mechanical in particular, they raised their rates, and so with that new contract, so it would, that would force that to go up. We inherited a bunch of contracts when we took over the Great Overland Station. We've also tried to, in an attempt to reduce the amount of impact that Capers is having on our budget, actually expand the amount of contracted mowing, because then that's not our job. And after doing the math, it's a little cheaper for us to do this as opposed to actually do it ourselves with part-time staff. So all of that played into that.
Tim, are there any operational changes that you see in Parks and Rec that would save some money?
Well, I see, quite honestly, this time next year, we're going to have some significant retirements. So that's not necessarily an operational cost, I guess, but And I think those positions will need to be replaced, but these are folks that have been with us for a long time, so whoever we hire will, I'm assuming, come in at a lower rate. But as far as things that I feel like we could cut, that's a hard question for me, because I'll just be really honest. I feel like we're barely doing everything we need to do now. There's hard choices that we make every day about how often are we going to mow this park? How often are we going to be able to go inspect playgrounds? It's tough to say right now that I could offer up, well, yeah, we could cut that. I just don't have that. I just don't feel like I have that.
Commissioner Mays, I know there has been, over the years, discussion with the Parks directors, with Counselor about the Parks and Rec merger contract with the City of Topeka, to maybe revisit whether some of the parcels that were received truly are parcels of park or are maybe parts of the road.
Correct.
And so I know that's been an ongoing discussion, and at some point, not today, but we should probably have the counselor weigh in and look at maybe a review with the Parks Director and then visit with the city manager and city council.
I would
Yeah.
agree.
I think that's a great point. I mean, there are literally just lots that aren't even related to parking that we maintain. They're not listed as parks, they're just property.
And all of that's in cartograph.
That is definitely in cartograph.
Some of those are just almost impossible to dispose of, too.
Yeah.
There's nobody that wants some of these little lots. So they're just all they are.
The other thing on here is the 48,000 retirement. And Parks and Recs, I understand you have several people that are eligible, but you're pretty close on where, I mean, your fund is pretty good right now, so I would say we probably don't need to put that entire 48,000 in there.
Was there an increase in I hate to go back to cartograph, was there an increase this year? I know it's listed as a comment.
I don't believe so. I think it was just the shift in who was paying what.
Commissioner Mays, would you, given your comments, if we were to increase the Parks and Rec budget by $350,000 instead of $391,000, would that address some of the comments that you made?
Yeah, I think that would.
Okay. Then I would make a motion to, and Betty, you're going to have to help me out on the numbers, but to increase the Parks and Rec budget by $350,000 over a flat budget.
That brings it up to $16,043,501.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really hate to bring this up, but this budget does not, we have not talked about any wage increases for part-time staff. So I know that the guard situation, the lifeguard pay has been a hot topic, and I just want to make sure that I mention it. I have some numbers on what that would mean as far as a budget impact.
Well, let's talk about it. What are the
Yeah.
budget?
Yeah, I was under the impression that was included.
Let me say that is something that is being looked at as part of the comp study. So how I am looking at this is the amount that I am recommending for the comp study increase, or for the comp study implementation would include that.
Okay, so it would be included at the bottom of our ledger as opposed to here.
Instead of each department.
Okay.
That's great. Well, just numbers wise, if you want to hear them, I mean, if we just took the lifeguards in particular, and raised all of them who weren't making $10 an hour to $10 an hour, and made that our starting wage, that would raise it a little over $125,000, is what $125,234 was our calculation. Now, this was a month or two ago. But if you look at all of our part-time seasonal staff, intermittent staff, the majority of them are making less than $10 an hour, or I think over 50% of them are. And so if you wanted to address it across the board, it would cost about, and that would include lifeguards, it would cost about $417,000 to do that. So I do think, for the record, and I know it's part of the wage study, and I'm glad to hear that, I know money's tight, but I do think that it would be nice to pay these, it would help us from a recruiting standpoint. I don't think that would solve our problem. I think the lifeguard issue in particular, again, you've heard me talk about it, it's a national problem. It's not just about wages. We would still have trouble hiring, but I think it's the right thing to do if we can afford to do it.
I agree with that statement. And I also don't want to necessarily keep it in the wage study. I think it's important that, even if the wage study comes back and says $8.50 an hour is reasonable, I think we probably ought to go ahead and increase that. It's been a long time. And so, I would say maybe if we put an extra $200,000 in there approximately, just for the wage increases, particularly the lifeguards, and then, whatever else.
So you're wanting to put it at the department level and take it out of the comp study implementation?
Yeah.
I would prefer that we leave that in our comp study, because to do so for one department without doing it to all the departments is going to create I see Angela's head nodding up and down. And so from an HR and from an accounting standpoint, I think that it would be better if we allocate that money there to the wage comp study, and then being able to divide it out to where it needs to go from our departments to address those needs such as lifeguards.
That would be my recommendation, because we will get an implementation plan from the consultants on the comp study, and they will come up with that implementation plan.
Okay.
So we do have, just to address our housekeeping, there's a motion on the floor to increase the Parks and Rec budget to $16,043,501. That was made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Mays. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0.
And I just might comment that that would cover all of their requests except the retirement fund.
Okay.
And it would leave a little bit, maybe $5,000 for the retirement fund.
If we can go down to, and I know that Andrew has been waiting patiently and he's next on our list. Yes, Commissioner Irvine.
I wanted to address Tim, if you can come back in. With the lifeguard situation, when do we start the hiring process for lifeguards?
I think that there's been a lot of debate about this. I know staff wants to start right after the first of the year, but I think we've been doing it in February, beginning of February is when we open
Do
it.
we train the lifeguards?
We offer lifeguard certification, yeah. And then obviously the regular training, outside of that, we do as well.
I would suggest we start the process for hiring them sooner and offers, let them know there's programs where you can get your certification, all that, just so we can get ahead of.
Agreed.
All right.
Maybe, and just to piggyback on that, maybe if we did some kind of a retention incentive for folks, if we can, as they leave to go back to school or whatever, if we could get them to sign on for next year, give them a little bit of a bonus for coming back.
And we have done that. I think we probably need to look at what that bonus is and try to make it a little bit more. I think the thing that would make, one of the biggest things I think we could do, and that we're talking about doing now is, matter of fact, I have a meeting at 1 o'clock this afternoon to talk about it, is actually paying for lifeguard certification. Because when you think about it, there's not very many jobs, especially one that pays $8.25 an hour, where you've got to go spend your own money to get certified, go through that process, and then maybe you get hired, you will get hired if you're certified, because we don't have any choice, but, it's just different than most other part-time jobs. So I've been involved in situations in the past where the certification was paid for, but you signed an agreement that you had to stay with us for 1 year. And then after that year, then you basically get your certification and you could go wherever you wanted. Because you wouldn't want to offer to pay for certification and then have people coming from other communities, and us paying for it and them going to work in Manhattan or Lawrence or someplace.
So Tim, who does the certification?
I'm going to bring up Randy Luby.
Hi, Randy Luby, Parks and Recreation. Dave Alaker has instructors that we hire to do that. We've actually, and I got a meeting with 501 later today also. I'm telling him, I'm encouraging him to try to have more lifeguard training classes throughout the winter and just renting Hummer Sports Park to do that. We're looking at every avenue. Like Tim said, we're meeting at 1 today with concerns of finishing out this year, but also looking at the future of how we can retain these guards. And I like the idea of an incentive bonus. If they work so many hours, it bumps them with a bonus. We did that several years ago, and it worked for a while, but we need to relook at that.
I just think if we can get them to agree on their way out, rather than trying to get them back next year, get them to make some sort of a commitment this year as they leave.
Definitely.
So, and then also for winter training, I think that's great. I don't know, if Hummer doesn't work, there's plenty of other indoor pools in town, so.
Exactly.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Betty, can we, since we're talking about wages, skip the elections, skip the COP bond debt service, and go down to the last item, which is implementation of the comp study,
Yes,
since we're already on that area of discussion?
yes. My recommendation is still $2.5 million based on our preliminary numbers with the consultant. That includes increasing the intermittent wages as well as the full-time people.
And that was from an initial request or guess of $4 million.
Yeah, that was, 4 million was really early in the process, and they had said maybe 3.5 to 4, so I had put it in the request as 4. We have narrowed that down now to, I think, 2.5 million is our best guess at this point in time. I've discussed this with Angela, and she agrees with that number.
Angela, can you have us some input as to maybe a timeline from Evergreen and where we might stand on knowing?
Good morning, Commissioners. Angela Lewis with Human Resources. Yes, we meet with them weekly now, and we're trying to fine-tune some things. The committee itself is looking at where we are, and we hope to have something, I'd say, by the end of next month. But, we want to get it right. Speed is important, but getting it right is way more important.
Okay. Any questions for Angela? Commissioner Mays?
So, I wasn't around when we did the last wage study.
Neither was I, if that helps.
So, well.
Jim was.
Jim was, okay, well.
I was.
I guess I'm looking at, I know that the last time it happened, we had, was it 3-year implementation?
Yes.
If I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
On-
How much
Correct.
was that annually,
That was,
approximately?
that was yes, we did it over 3 years because we had over $5 million that, and Jim was in charge of the HR department, so he might have some additional information, more detailed information than what I remember, but we just didn't have the funds that the commission was willing to commit to that at the time, so we spread that over a 3-year period of time. At the end of that 3 years, we got to the same place we would have at the end of the 3 years, but it just took us longer to get there.
We were also working on trying to build up the reserves and address, we had a lot more
Yes.
disparity than I think we're having now.
Yes.
So there was a lot more employees to try and catch up.
'Cause even if we would have done it all at one time then, if I remember right, it was 5 million plus.
Betty, that's what I remember too.
So Angela, instead of spacing this out over several years, your recommendation is to address it in 1 year to kind of catch the employees up?
Yes, I think that would be the best way to go.
I mean, and I agree that we need to get our wages up to where they need to be based on the comp study, but I feel like when we see the final product, I mean, there are going to be areas that are grossly probably deficient in wages and others that are pretty close. And I think what we should probably do is maybe, if we did a 2-year implementation, the first year take care of the folks that are way off, and then come back the next year and catch everybody else up. I think it just softens the blow a little bit.
I don't think that would be well received, especially by the unions or the bargaining units. I think what we did last time was we would bring everyone up to a certain amount. And maybe, Jim, you can explain it a little better than I can.
Yeah, you've got to keep in mind that we've got 4 different bargaining units that Angela needs to bargain with on these wage increases. All of the contracts currently have wage reopeners to address that. They're all waiting on the results, just like all employees are. Nobody's going to want to wait. No one's going to want to say, okay, this bargaining unit is further behind than we are, so we'll go ahead and wait. Sure. It's just not a practical way to do it. So what we do is we tell the company that does the study whether we want to do it in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, and then they will help us design how to implement the wage increases to bring them up to market by whatever year we target, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. So you really have to do it globally.
Okay.
To be fair to everyone. There will be some, you're exactly right, there will be some that will be more behind than others, and it'll potentially take longer to get them up to speed depending on how we design it.
And what we did last time, we did tell them that first year here is how much money we have to spend. We did the same thing. We budgeted a certain amount, and we told them, here is how much we have to devote to this for this first year. And then they came up with an implementation plan based on that.
Can we at least put the two, Commissioner Mays, my motion is to allocate $2.5 million, again, knowing this is a preliminary, non-binding, non-final budget, so we can see how that is going to impact the mill levy.
I mean, I think it's fine if we want to put it on there as a placeholder, but I think I'm kind of leaning towards maybe directing Evergreen to do 2-year implementation. We've had wage increases this year.
For some departments.
For several departments, but, you know, I mean, I assume that's why it's $2.5 million instead of 4 or 5, but,
Well, and we also have tried to keep up with wages increases as much as we could, too, throughout these last 5 years. You know, we haven't had any year that I'm aware of that people didn't get any type of an increase. You know, we have tried to keep the 1 step and 1% going throughout these times. So we've tried to keep it up closer to the market, and we tried to keep it what we thought was at the market, but seeing that maybe we're lacking a little bit.
Commissioner Mays, I understand the concern with the 2-year implementation as opposed to a 1 year. I just look at where we're at as a country and as a county with hiring, and it's very important that we maintain our current staffing. It's very difficult to get new employees and the cost of training new employees, and so I think that we need to try to keep our workforce as whole as possible. I'm especially concerned with areas in Public Works, Department of Corrections. Again, our biggest expenditures, Parks and Recreation, those are our big areas where we're really lacking in employees. So my motion is to add $2.5 million for the implementation of a comp study. Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I think I want to revisit it later as well.
Okay. Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Mays. Further discussion?
Yeah, I think we need to review this a little bit more as well.
Okay.
All right.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Mays. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, reflect that it passes 3-0. Bring back up to elections.
Elections is asking for $156,000 over a flat budget.
Andrew, is there anything additional you wish to add?
I will remind you that when we purchased that printing equipment, the maintenance on that is $40,000.
Andrew Howell, Shawnee County Election Commissioner. Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, I think just a reminder that really the best comparison for our budget is actually 2018. If you go back 4 years, you have a more like cycle of elections. So just a reminder on that. And if you increase 2018 by 1.5% a year, I think you'll find we're actually fairly close. And additionally, if you exclude MSA 1, again, which is wages, we're only requesting about $76,000, and Betty's right, about $40,000 of that is actually the mailing equipment that I believe that we need and need to use in order to handle mail ballots more efficiently, because I believe the public will use mail ballots more, and I believe that we need to have the capacity to handle more than, I think our internal capacity without equipment is about 7,000 or 8,000, and we, once you hit 10,000 ballots, stuffing those by hand isn't accurate enough, and it takes staff past midnight. It's just not sustainable. So, if you consider all those factors, I consider our request to functionally be just a flat budget request. Additionally, that does not take into consideration that we're going to have to redesign our mail ballot envelopes to meet new state requirements. So there's probably a $5,000 to $10,000 additional cost that needs to be met related to that. Additionally, just as another consideration, I have half the staff in the building are brand new, will need some training. I think it's important that we maintain our ability to stay current with best practices, let me say it that way. Additionally, in 2022, we have 2 additional expenses that have to be met. These are not optional. We will have additional redistricting costs in 2022 that will have to be met. I cannot predict how the legislature will handle that. Will they get their work completed prior to June 1, or will it impact filing deadline and rebuilding maps and rebuilding street files? I don't know. Last time around, it wasn't pretty. I wasn't there for it in 2012, but my understanding was there was a lot of overtime that occurred in 2012 because redistricting maps were not completed until past, or I think they had to actually extend the filing deadline in order for people to know what districts they were going to be running in, and then we have to reconfigure every street file inside the database to make sure that it matches those new map lines. And then additionally, I think we're going to spend about an extra $20,000 complying with current law as it relates to the requirement for a new set of ballots for unaffiliated voters in the primary on the constitutional question that's occurring in 22 as well. So there's going to be an additional 200 and some different ballot styles that we'll have to create, and I expect about a $20,000 increase of cost. So I think when you factor in all those factors, we've actually reduced the budget functionally just because there are so many new requirements that we're going to have to meet. And again, I know that wages are up. Wages are up, increased costs are real, and I'm not really talking about the increased cost for personnel, because I know that's real, but I'm really talking about the functional side of our budget, about what are we doing differently, where are we spending additional money, and why are we doing that. I guess also just a reminder, our election workers are still at $7.25 an hour. I expect a lot of difficulty in 2022 finding election workers. We're already down significantly from what we were able to do in 20. So I know that needs to be addressed. That is not included in any of these numbers, and I believe that the commission will have to actually address that as a resolution, because our election worker wages are currently set by resolution, I believe, from the year 2008. So that's not addressed at all, and it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue for the election office. There are additional issues, just so that you're aware. I don't have any mail cost increases put in this budget. My understanding is the post office is, I believe, in the next month or two, is coming out with a 6 to 7% increase. I don't have that in here. I don't have any increase for gas costs. I think we all got hit this year a little bit with some increased gas costs. And additionally, I think we mentioned this, there is no increased cost for any unknown elections, such as if a bond election were to occur. It's been a while since I've seen one of those, so it would not shock me in the next year or two to find a bond election occurring. Again, 80% to 90% will be covered by whoever's requesting an election should that occur, but there always is some additional cost that does get left to the county to cover. So I think we probably could cut about $20,000 worth of mailing equipment and still survive. I think we could do that. So I'm just telling you, I think that's a possibility. But considering all the other factors that I've mentioned today, you may cut that and then find that I have to come back and ask for more than that in some other category come 22. So I feel like we've done a good job of putting together the best numbers that we can, that it is possibly able to be done. But I guess those are just all of the considerations I wanted you to consider.
Questions for Andrew? Andrew, while the commissioners are looking, if Shawnee County was to declare the election day a holiday, thereby freeing up county employees to work election, would that be something that would be, I know that we would have an offset cost, because every time we declare a holiday, that costs money.
That wasn't what I was going to say.
So I just jumped in.
What I was going to remind you is that we allow any of our employees to work an election and still get paid.
Okay.
And we have a number of people from other departments that do excellent work. I'm super pleased with the number of people that do that and are excellent election workers. So I know corrections, I think Public Works, I know there's 3 or 4 different departments, so I apologize if I didn't mention your name, but we've got several that have several people that help with that. I think it would be helpful to have additional county employees. I will say, one of the things that did help us, kudos to the governor, having state employees be eligible and encouraging that was helpful. That was part of how we actually made it through 2020 without significant issues as it relates to, and a lot of other counties had significant issues. Fortunately, we did not, because I think toward the end there were a lot of folks in the community making a big push to try to help us find additional qualified and capable workers. So kudos to the state for helping in that regard. And hopefully they continue that, because it was very helpful.
Mr. Mays?
No, I can't think of anything.
Commissioner Rippon? Andrew, your request was to increase your budget $156,412. You're now saying you believe you can cut 26,000?
We've identified some mailing equipment that we think we can just not pay the maintenance and not, I think there's a couple of items that we can manage through different ways, doing some of it by hand, some of it by contract. We think we can save as much as 20 to 24,000. On a one-year trial basis, let's try it. The only caveat I would say to that is, I don't know how many other departments may want to use some other equipment at some point, but I think we can try it for a year, see how it works, and I think we can make that work for 22.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mays.
Well, with that information, I would say that maybe if I'll make a motion that we approve $1,710,000 as their budget.
I'll second, again, knowing that everything is preliminary at this time. Any
That's
further
fine.
discussion? Seeing none, motion made by Commissioner Mays to increase the budget for elections.
Not 15 million, but,
I know.
okay.
All right, there we
No,
go.
I'm still doing it wrong here. Okay.
I'm sure Andrew would be
So
happy with that, but
say again, 1,000,000.
710,000.
There we go. That's my problem. There we go.
Setting the elections budget at $1,710,000. Motion made by Commissioner Mays, second by Commissioner Cook. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. That leaves us with COP debt service.
Yes, and for the, what I'm showing at the flat budget amount is what it was last year, which is what we normally do for the flat budget. What I have done for the budget request is I have taken this year's debt service and added $850,000 for principal and interest for the $10 million that has already been approved to issue. It has been approved as the intent to issue it. We have not issued it. We have not taken any steps to issue it. But because that had been approved in the past, I included the $850,000 for debt service. Should you not want to issue that, or should you want to issue less this year, then that number will, of course, go down. In fact, our debt service will go down this year. Our existing debt service goes down this year from last year.
Betty, when we were working through the budget for this year, and we knew that we were possibly going to bond $10 million, how much did we set aside for the principal and interest for 2021?
For 2021, we set aside $300,000, and that was interest only.
Okay.
So that is also an option for interest only for just the first year. We can only do that for 1 year, but we could do that if you don't want to, you can also budget to issue something halfway through the year, and then you could budget for just a half a year's interest, something like that.
And if we don't bond any money in 2021, how much of that money then could be used to roll forward to 2022?
If you don't issue anything this year, your debt service will actually go down, and I can tell you what that amount would be.
Jennifer, I think you know the question I'm asking.
I think you're asking if can you use, sorry. I'm guessing this is what you're asking, so I may be wrong. I think you're saying since you budgeted $300,000 in 2021, can you roll that unused budgeted money over to 2022?
Correct.
Okay. And the answer to that is no.
Why?
Because it is budgeted for a flat budget year.
General.
It's general fund money, and you can only do that if it's in a separate fund that is not a budgeted fund, then you can roll that money over. But general fund is a budgeted fund, so by state accounting methods, or whatever you want to call it, you cannot. Yeah. Once that budget year is done, it's done.
Okay. And then Betty, your calculation, if on interest
Okay,
only.
if you did not do anything and just stayed with the existing debt service, you would, this would actually be a decrease from the flat budget of $537,025. That's just to pay the existing debt service we have now.
Without taking on any new debt
Yes,
in 2022.
yes.
Betty, in talking with Whit O'Brien, new projects such as at 21st and Urish would most likely not qualify for ARPA, but existing parks may qualify with additional information?
Yes, that's true. Deferred maintenance of existing parks would be covered under ARPA.
And I know that the Parks and Rec has identified quite a bit of deferred maintenance within their parks.
Yeah, you have to make that distinction of it being deferred maintenance. And then it also helps if it's in a qualified census tract, which is identified as lower income areas.
Commissioner Rippon, your thoughts on debt?
I think this is going to allow us to reconfigure our capital improvement plan. Because, in setting through this with Whit O'Brien, like Betty mentioned, there's a number of, especially the park maintenance equipment replacement that will qualify for the ARPS money. Now, equipment's a little more dicey.
Equipment, they said, for it to qualify, you'd have to look and make sure that it was over the useful life or over the hours used for it to qualify.
But by paying for some of that with the ARPS money, then that would allow us to use that funding for something else.
CIP?
Yes. So it could drastically change things.
Well, but the CIP, as you might recall, it was already eaten up by many departments before we even got to Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Well, yes, because we did the critical and the high
Yeah.
priority.
Betty, if we did not have the reduction of the $537,000, looking at interest only, that would be a flat budget, correct?
If we did interest only on that, for how much?
For $10 million?
I got an extra zero there. So then you would decrease it from the flat budget of $237,000.
And then leaving it at a flat budget would be interest in principal, is that correct?
Leaving it at the budget request,
Yes.
which would be in adding to the flat budget by $312,975.
Commissioner Mays?
I'm having a hard time tracking the math.
Okay.
So,
Our current debt service would be $3,257,744. That would be our current debt service,
okay.
which is 537,000 less than we have budgeted this year.
So it says 850,000 though, in the side note there, so I mean, it's.
So I've taken
I
that.
guess I don't understand the difference between the 850,000 and the 500.
Okay, I have taken the flat budget is what we paid last year. And what we budgeted last year. And that's the flat budget, because that's, the formula I use to calculate a flat budget. If we do nothing, we are paying $537,000 less in debt service this year, because we've had some of it that has fallen off. I added $850,000 based on the approval of that $10 million. So, does that help at all? I don't know how to.
And two, you don't have to do that for a full, you could start that.
You could start at mid-year. You could start at mid-year and only pay interest for a year. You could only do a portion of the 10 million. I mean, there's so many different variables.
Betty, can we look at principal and interest for $5 million?
That would be $425,000.
$5 million would allow us to start the projects at Family Park with some of the pickleball. It would allow us to finish up projects out at Dornwood. It would reimburse the cost of the trail extension. And so it would at least get some things started, but maybe not and knowing that we would be able to use some of the ARPA money for the rebuilding of the clubhouse and our deferred maintenance at Cypress Ridge, which I think Parks and Rec has identified as being a much higher need.
And that, as deferred maintenance, I don't know that we've addressed it with ARPA specifically, whether that would be included or not. It would be considered deferred maintenance. I mean, if you've walked out there and seen the building, you could consider it deferred maintenance. So it may be something that,
Especially if the usage went up during COVID.
that's true, yeah.
And with the increase of golf through COVID.
So that may be something that could be handled through ARPA funds? We didn't talk about that specifically with the consultant.
Debt on
And-
$5 million with principal and interest.
This is if you issued it in beginning of the year, and so you were paying principal and interest the whole year. Yes.
And that would be how much?
It would total $3,682,000, so you'd actually go down from the flat budget by $112,000.
Commissioner Mays, thoughts?
I don't know if it's,
I don't know if it's feasible to need it the first part of the year.
well, I don't know if it's worthwhile to even bond for $5 million. That, I mean, it kind of makes me think that, you know, what if we just did some, you know, $1 million or $2 million, and then just did some temp notes
You
for
can
the
do
time
temp
being?
notes. Temp notes can be,
1 year.
I'm sorry,
You
for 1
only
year,
have-
yes,
have
you can
one-
only do temp note for 1 year.
1 year. And then you have to you can
Generally,
refinance
yes.
it, but you can only do temp note for 1 year.
But, I mean, I think, you know, if we were gonna do, I mean, that would at least kind of get the ball rolling without, man, I just don't know how we can issue $10 million of debt this year. It just doesn't feel right. So, I mean,
Again, considering that there's going to be a substantial amount of money from ARPA that we know will most likely go to some deferred maintenance projects with Parks and Rec. So it's not that the Parks and Rec will be completely neglected.
true, but, you know, we're whittling away at that ARPA money pretty quickly.
Yes.
I mean,
I think that 34 million is
I
going to
mean,
go
it
faster
comes-
than you
it-
think it's going to.
It's come up on a lot of different
It
budget
has,
items.
yeah.
It's not an infinite amount of money, and, I mean, and if, you know, we have 3 years to spend it, if we spend it all in the first year, you know, I don't know,
I
I
don't think
just,
that's gonna happen.
what's that?
I don't think that will happen.
No, but,
Well, it has taken Parks and Rec 4 years to spend $3 million from excess revenue.
Well, and they still
More or
have.
less.
They still have $500,000 left in that fund. So, yeah, you have to look at too, if these projects you're going to fund, how long is it going to take them to really get construction ready also?
Yeah, I see Family Park, I don't know that we'll see construction next year. I mean, there's a lot of design work needs to take place first, so I could see it next year just being a year of design.
well, and I could see,
I mean,
you
it
know,
still costs
a
money,
couple
but-
of features. I mean, the great thing about that master plan is that it doesn't have to all be done at once. It's-
Right.
I mean, there's different components that can be added gradually over the years, and so, you know, I look at it and I think, okay, well, you know, playground, a dog park, there's some of those things that don't cost a lot. You know, the big facility is gonna be a lot more, and that's, you know, probably gonna need to be a separate bond issue someday, but,
Another thing you could look at is not bonding anything, not committing anything at this point in time. Look at it again in mid-year, and, you know, if that's something you want to do a temp note for a half a year or something with interest only, you could look at contingency funds for that.
I think that would be my preference at this point.
So then that would be the reduction of 300,000?
5.
5. Commissioner Rippon?
537.
I don't want to totally give up on some of these projects. You had made them.
Well, I had just thrown it out for discussion, 5,
Discussion.
instead of,
But unless interest rates are rising, you don't want to issue debt until you can use it. You know, we don't want to be paying interest on something we're not using. So, and sometimes that changes if interest rates are really looking like they're going to rise. But and that's something we can watch. But right now, I'm not foreseeing a huge increase in interest rates.
But the temp notes are just good for, that's just a year.
Up to a year. But you can renew them for another year. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't have the paper in front of me right now, but we have debt rolling off this year, but we have a substantial amount rolling off next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I don't have it in front of me either. Not in '22, but I think '23, we have a substantial amount rolling off.
Commissioner Rippon?
I'm thinking.
I'm just kind of the mind where I think that, potentially we could get some progress done in Family Park without issuing $10 million of debt right now.
Doing the temp notes, how would that compare into our interest?
The interest rate's a little higher, not a lot, and being short-term, that also makes it a little higher. It can make it higher or lower, depending on the way the interest rates are going. But we can generally do that with a local bank. Our bond counsel usually arranges that for us, and we can get a reasonable, market rate.
All right. I don't see us doing a lot of construction maybe next year, but like I said,
Commissioner Mays,
possibly.
I know that we're looking at a reduction of $537,000. In order to have a number on the page, but maybe knowing that we're going to come back, can we just do a reduction of $300,000? Which, Betty, that was the number that you had earlier, was the reduction to 300, was it 311? You had it reduced down.
That was if I added, was that if I added 300,000 interest only for a
Yes,
year?
yes.
That's interest only for 10 million for 1 year.
Right. Can we do that for right now? Still a reduction.
We can always come back and visit it, so.
I'll make the motion then that we have debt service of $3,555,744. Is there a second?
Second.
Let me ask a question. When we look at this again, would it be less confusing if I changed the flat budget to what our debt service actually is with no new debt for this year?
It would make it
That would
easier
be-
for me.
I will do that.
And
I
Betty,
was just trying to stay consistent with my formula that I used for everything else, but let me do that, and I think that'll be less confusing.
Amend your motion then to.
no, and I would just, at this time,
Yeah.
I think that if you were
We should
able
come
to
up
do
with the
some
same.
scenarios saying, what, 10 million, 5 million, interest
Okay.
only, interest
I
plus
can do that.
principal.
That would help.
I can do that and send it to
Temp
you, so
notes.
you have time to
Yep.
think about it before we get together again on Monday.
Yes, so motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflected, it passes 3-0. That is all of the areas that we had not previously addressed. Are there any areas that we wish to go back to today?
Do we want to go back to, what was the one I had here? The other
Appraisers?
Appraiser.
Appraisers, right. He had indicated in an email that he didn't think he needed that 20,000, was it 20,000?
Right, you'd given him 20,000 for his retirement fund, and he felt like his retirement fund was okay.
Mr. Baumann, I see at the back of the room.
And I just want to say I appreciate him being a team player.
Explain yourself.
Good morning, Steve Bauman, County Appraiser. Yeah, I think when you were looking at some of the numbers, that spreadsheet, the terminology on it may have been a little confusing. So our retirement account, I feel confident that we have enough currently in there to last us through the next several years without the additional 20,000. That was, can't believe I'm turning down funding, but at this point, I don't believe it's necessary that we take it when other departments are in need.
Motions?
I would make a motion that we adjust the appraiser's office down 20,000 from what we approved the other day.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Mays, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. The new amount then would be $1,992,399. Other areas.
Under the Board of County Commissioners, I think there was a mischaracterization on here of the $13,000. It was titled as communication supplies. I made that motion the other day to remove that, but I didn't realize that it was also for some software and some phone needs and things like that, training as well.
Mileage.
And so I'd like to go ahead and add that back in.
So is your motion for the requested amount?
Yeah,
or-
to go back to the requested amount for that item.
So then there would be a motion for the budget for the Board of County Commissioners to be $512,676.
Correct.
Motion made by Commissioner Mays.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. Any others? Okay. Then let's hold Betty at this point. Our estimated mill levy would be an increase of?
4.033 mils.
Okay. And Betty, off the top of your head, how, can we, maybe before Monday, unless you know now, how much would that impact an increase on a $100,000 house?
Yeah, I don't have that here in
Okay.
front of me, but I can.
I think that it's always good to put a mill in perspective to actual impact to the taxpayers.
I can do that.
So, all right, then, we'll leave this then. Motion to defer any further discussion until Monday, August the 2nd. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Motion made to defer any further discussion of the 2022 budget to August the 2nd, made by Commissioner Cook, second by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Reflect that it passes 3-0. Madam Clerk, our next item.
Item 5, Administrative Communications.
This is an opportunity for any department head to address the commission on any item. Seeing no rush of participants. Commissioner Mays, anything additional?
Nothing from me.
Commissioner Rippon, anything?
I've been staying in the shade.
Okay. Since Tim Laurent won't mention it, on July the 31st, on this Saturday at 10 o'clock, there's to be a ribbon cutting at the Santa Fe Park. This is a update from a prior ribbon cutting of the painting and the renovations to Santa Fe Park. Do want to thank all the artists that came to work on it and how it turned out. And I would encourage, if anybody wishes to come by and take a look at it, it is very vibrant. There's a lot of color, and it looks good. So that's Saturday the 31st at 10 o'clock. Madam Clerk, our next item.
Item 6, executive session.
There is not a need for an executive session. We are adjourned.
Possible.